All right, let's shine a bright spotlight on this conversation, shall we? Let's talk some baseball.
Let's do it.
Feels to me like you've seen some teams and some coaches in this league that just kind of bang around for a while on the door of excellence to elite teams. And baseball is a weird and funny game, and I don't have to tell Arkansas fans that. But you saw this with Tim Corbin. He banged around for a while at Vanderbilt, finally got himself a national title. Kevin O'Sullivan in Florida did the same thing. A couple years later, he got his. Dave Van Horn's been in the league longer than both those guys. And I think are close. They all three came in the league within a couple of years of each other, and I don't always remember who came first. But point is, Arkansas feels like that other program. Maybe a half step behind those other two because of the national titles in terms of perception. But it feels like now I guess you could say this about Florida State too, and it never happened. But I think this team's better. Feels like maybe at some point you keep knocking on the door. Like maybe you look at the roster, you look at the pitching, you look at how consistent he's been at getting them to Omaha. Feels like maybe this year, and I'm just going to guess that's been a conversation among fans in Fayetteville.
Yeah, I mean, it is every year. I mean, that's the expectation. I mean, we've gotten to a point here in Fayetteville where fans aren't necessarily happy. I mean, they won the SEC last year. They were the number 4 national seed. And if you ask a normal Arkansas baseball fan, they would say it was a disappointing year because they lost in the regional. And that's crazy. And that's just the standard that they've set. And I think that even a run to the College World Series is not necessarily like, oh, this was a great season. Like they really need to win one. I mean, they really do. I feel like, as you said, if you just keep getting there and giving yourself a chance, surely it's going to happen. I mean, it came just agonizingly close back in 2018. Don't have to talk about that, but they're right there, and they do have the pieces this year. I mean, if you look at it, they should be so freaking good. Hagen Smith, I think, is in for a All-America type year. I saw him in the scrimmage the other day. He threw 1 inning, he threw 10 fastballs, and they averaged 98.5 miles an hour. So he's added velocity. We haven't even seen the splitter that he's added yet. He struck out dudes with his slider. So, I mean, I think he's going to be really, really good. If you get a guy like that on Friday nights, you give yourself a chance, especially when you've got Mason Molina and Brady Tigert coming up their other 2 days of the weekend. So, and then plus you got all the talent you got in the bullpen. So I think they're going to be really, really good. And should be right in the conversation with when it comes to Omaha and winning the whole thing.
Well, here's where I see a difference with their pitching this year. And you tell me if wrong, because you know Arkansas baseball a lot better than I do. But they've had a lot of these big angular dudes that come out and they throw hard, and they've got great stuff. But what usually comes with that is a lot of wildness. And I look at the top of their rotation this year, Hagen Smith, I guess he was a little wild last year, but you would think he'd be a little bit more of a strike thrower. Tigert in particular has been more of a strike thrower. I feel like that's a little bit more there. And the other thing, you look at the Cops team a couple years ago, and it was amazing what they did. But you just kept looking at the guys after them, and they're like, okay, it is I think they had Cody, was it Morris on that team? That really kind of held it. They had a couple guys that they could count on, but after 3 or 4 guys and Cops, it really dropped off. And you're just like, at some point, this staff's going to run out of gas. I feel like this team is less apt to run out of gas unless they just get a slew of injuries.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, last year's staff was set up to be really, really good, and there was a slew of injuries. I mean, they really have, knock on wood, avoided that for the most part so far. Freshman Hunter Dietz did have a minor procedure done after fall ball. He's going to miss the first part of the season, but should be back by April. But he's an incredibly talented lefty that is still probably going to contribute in some way in the bullpen, but it was going to be out of the bullpen. Maybe a midweek start here and there, but that was what you were missing with him. And they've got so many dudes that can step up and perform. And you got Will McIntyre back. He doesn't have like the sexiest stuff in the world, but he is a strike thrower. He's reliable, pitch to contact. He's probably a guy that can maybe pitch multiple times on weekends. Veteran guy. You've got just incredibly talented guy. A lot of guys that last year, because of all those injuries, had to pitch as freshmen before they were ready. I mean, you look at Ben Bybee and Parker Coyle. Those guys' ERAs last year were like 6 and 7. So just terrible. I mean, to be quite honest, they had some good moments, but for the most part, their numbers not good. They're now sophomores, and they should be. They really expect those guys to make that next step and be, big time contributors, either out of the bullpen or as a fourth starter, that kind of thing. So the talent and the depth on this pitching staff, I was talking about with a couple of guys early the other day, and said there's going to be some really talented pitchers that don't get very many innings just because there's not very many innings available. So the pitching staff is why I think people should be so high on this team, the depth and the quality.
Well, McIntyre's one that you mentioned. I love having a guy like that around because you've seen him do a lot of stuff. He's not flashy, but at the end of the day, you need guy, and this is really where it comes invaluable is in postseason, especially if you get to Omaha where it's a bigger, more forgiving ballpark. If you could just go out there and give innings and throw strikes, it's a great piece to have. The other guy, Mason Molina, 3.67 ERA at Texas Tech last year. I'm not a Big 12 ballpark expert, but that seems like a place in Lubbock where a lot of runs get scored. This is where you start to see teams separate. You get to Sunday in the SEC, and how many times it's just about every other series, unless it's maybe Vandy or Florida or the teams with really elite pitching staffs. Tennessee you could put in there now too. It's like, okay, we don't know what in the world we're going to do. We're going to give this guy a shot because we're out of options. Having a Mason Molina in that spot where everybody else is trying to figure it out with the Will McIntyre is a backstop too. That I think that's really where you're going to see Arkansas get to some places that other teams can't.
Yeah, this rotation, assuming they all stay healthy, it should be one of the best Arkansas has ever had. I put it right up there with, here's a blast from the past, 2007, they had Nick Schmidt, Jess Todd, and Duke Welker. Those were all three guys that got drafted relatively high. Nick Schmidt was a first-round pick, All-American. Those guys, that was an incredible rotation. 2013, I believe they led the nation in ERA, and they had Ryan Stanek, some other guys in the rotation. Incredible. This is going to be right up there with that those rotations in terms of Arkansas history, because you've got Brady Tygart, Mason Molina, whichever order they go. I mean, I could easily see Molina going on Saturday, Tygart going on Sunday, or vice versa. And that's incredible. I mean, Molina is not the most overpowering guy. He sits maybe in the low 90s, but he's got a 4-pitch mix. He's gotten more confident with his changeup this year. You throw in Tygart, he's a guy that's got a 4-pitch mix, even though people really only talk about the fastball and the curveball with him because he's got incredible spin rates. So they've got what should be a pretty salty 1, 2, 3 starting rotation.
What do we make of their hitting? Because I think that is most people's question publicly. I see a lineup that's not maybe outstanding, but potentially pretty balanced, which is Arkansas's put a lot of those out there lately. I think that the Wagner kid from Tarleton is a guy that I think D1 Baseball was talking about a little bit as a guy to watch out for. He popped 15 homers a year ago. They bring in a shortstop transfer with some power from Sacramento State. I'm going to have a Peyton Stovall discussion with you in just a minute too, but overall thoughts on their lineup.
It should be pretty good, and they should have plenty of options. That's the good thing is if somebody's not performing, they're going to be able to go to somebody else. Now, there's a few guys in there that are probably going to be there because that's their defensive position. Like Ty Wilmsmeyer, transfer from Missouri, probably your starting center fielder. If he doesn't hit like you hope he does, oh well, but he's your best defensive center fielder, so he's probably going to play. But there's question marks like that. I think they really want Jason Jones, who was a heralded freshman. They were really excited to get to campus last year. Didn't play a whole lot as a true freshman. He's more of a natural infielder, but they've moved him to outfield. They really want him to win the job in left field, but I'm not sure if he's going to hit consistently enough. The dude, when he makes contact, hits it with 110 mile an hour exit velos.
Yeah.
But it's making contact that's the issue. He does strike out a lot. He does walk a lot though too. So I mean, you get the whole 3 true outcome thing with him. But if he doesn't win the job, they've got another couple of guys that could slot in there in left field. Will Edmondson, a JUCO transfer, he's a guy that hits for average, maybe doesn't have a lot of pop, can steal a base when he's on base. So I mean, he's a guy that could win the job. They brought in Ross Lovich, another guy from Missouri. Who's got experience in the SEC. I think he hit over 300 in SEC play last year. He could be a guy that slots in. So you got guys that are flexible. I mean, Jack Wagner, you mentioned him. He's competing for the starting job at first base with Ben McLaughlin, who last year had to fill in for because of an injury and ended up hitting like 360 or something like that. And most of that was in SEC play. So that dude can hit. Whoever doesn't win that job, maybe they could DH. So it's really fascinating, and plus they've got like 4 legitimate options at catcher, which in college baseball is ridiculous. You're lucky if you have 2, and they've got 4 that they could rely on, including Hudson White, transfer from Texas Tech, who can 1,000% hit the ball, has really focused on defensively. He's a guy that could also play first base if you need him to. Jack Wagner, I mentioned, competing for the job at first base. He could also play left field if you know those other options at left field. So I think what I'm getting at is this lineup has options. So if somebody's not producing, they have other guys they can put in. And just statistically speaking, you think based on their prior production, one of those guys is going to hit and be able to produce for you.
Yeah, and the other thing, I remember watching the draft last year and keeping track of who schools were getting through the draft. Their haul was pretty bonkers. So they got some young kids on top of that we may not be talking about right now, but they're talented. And you just never know when injury or underperformance is going to give somebody an opportunity, and out of the blue in April or May comes the next guy.
The one guy you're going to probably hear about is Ryder Helfrich, the catcher. It would not surprise me if he won the starting job for opening day behind the plate, even over Hudson White. I bet Hudson White still starts on opening day just because he is the transfer, older guy. They probably told him, hey, we're going to bring you in and let you play. But Ryder Helfrich's the guy they were really nervous about, getting him through the draft. And when he did, he's got just incredible raw talent. And it's more, maybe I say raw, but it's probably more polished than most freshman. And here's the thing: Dave Van Horn has thrown out a James McCann comp. So that tells me, okay, this dude might be pretty good. So I regardless, I think you're going to see both of those guys catching throughout the year, with the other 2 guys that returned from last year's team who seem to be hitting better. That was their issue last year, is they combined have a batting average under the Mendoza line. But they seem to be hitting better. So maybe you got, those guys' options. But to me, I think it's going to be Hudson White, Ryder Helfrich behind the plate. And that should ideally keep both of them fresh. That's what you worry about with catchers, is them wearing down by the end of the year if they're catching every day. If you can split the time, keep them both fresh, and that may benefit you as well.
Okay, I promised you would have a Peyton Stovall conversation. Where does that movie head this year?
Well, he seems to be back and healthy, because he had the season-ending shoulder injury last year. I believe it was his labrum, had to be repaired. He's back. He's practicing. I saw him in the scrimmage on Monday. So he's back. He looks good. There's always that concern with that labrum that it's going to be hard to throw. We've seen that happen with Trevor Ezell, a guy that transferred in that was a second baseman at SEMO. Ended up moving to first base at Arkansas because his shoulder just never got back to where it was supposed to be or where it needed to be. Apparently that's not the issue with Stovall. He's throwing fine. They don't have any concerns. There's conversation about him batting leadoff for Arkansas. We've seen him hit really well when he's healthy. He struggled a bit as a freshman when he had all those accolades, but Dave Van Horn was pretty open about, like, man, it was weighing on him. Like, he had the weight of the world on him as a freshman. And by the end of the year in postseason, he was probably Arkansas's best, most consistent hitter when they made the run to the College World Series semifinals. He hit over like 300 in the postseason, maybe even close to 400 in the postseason. Started off last year hot, got hurt, just fell off a cliff before they finally shut him down and had the surgery. So I think they've got high hopes for him. He's a team captain, and I think he puts it all together this year. But I'm maybe not expecting like an All-America type year, but I think he'll be at the very least a very good second baseman for Arkansas.
All right, let's end with expectations and schedule talk. 3 in D1, 3 in Baseball America, 2 in Perfect Game. I don't think the coaches poll has come out as we're doing this. So big expectations, and I think for very good reason. The schedule sets up, I think, is that second week in a neutral site, or is that in Arkansas? The Oregon State, Oklahoma State.
That's in Arlington.
Okay, so they actually don't have a true road series. That's neutral until at Auburn, second weekend of conference play. Road trip scenario could be worse at Alabama, at South Carolina, at Kentucky, at A&M. Also, the don't get could be worse. Don't get Vandy, don't get Tennessee, don't get Georgia, which is a little bit intriguing. I think between the talent and the schedule, I mean, look, there's nothing easy in the SEC, but you open SEC play with Missouri. I think things seem to set up nicely for them. Is that fair?
I agree. I do. I think it sets up about as well as you could hope. I mean, pretty sure LSU's at home this year. The Mississippi schools are at home. Who knows how good they're going to be, but you'd like to think they're going to be decent. So I think the schedule sets up nicely for them. You got that. It's nice that the Arlington excuse me, the Arlington event is the second weekend of the season, not the first. Mm-hmm. It's been the first for Arkansas before, and I mean it worked out fine. But you get to open the year with James Madison. I think it's nice that first series is a 4-game series, so you get to kind of see who that fourth weekend starter is. And it's also the game is scheduled for a Monday, so it's not like there's a midweek game. So you can maybe potentially have that guy available for the weekends, the next weekend in Arlington. So I think it sets up nicely. They're going to get challenged. They're going to get to learn a lot about their team and hopefully maybe develop some roles for that pitching staff out of the bullpen. Like, we know who the 3 starters are going to be, but we don't really know who the closer is going to be. We don't know who the setup man's going to be. We don't know who long relief's going to be, maybe outside of Will McIntyre. So going to be very fascinating to see how it all plays out. And it's good to get some of that figured out before SEC play. And it's also really nice that you get Missouri to open SEC play to further kind of help figure things out.
Andrew, we covered a ton of ground today. And anything on the way out of note that we didn't get into?
Well, I think we covered it all. I mean, it was good to end the talk on some baseball, because I think it's going to be a fun, special year in Fayetteville.
I think our bread is buttered in the same places, so we can't wait for it. SEC baseball this year. I'm just getting into my research for it. Is we're doing basketball wall to wall, and man, it's bananas how good this league is going to be this year. Hutch, can't thank you enough for spending your time with us today at a busy time for you. Tell folks where they can follow all your coverage, please.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, at NWA Hutch. I post all of my stuff on there, but you can also find it at bestofarkansassports.com. Luckily, we're completely free, independent site, so no paywall. If you want to read more in depth on the baseball team that I've been talking about, I've been covering it pretty extensively over the last week or so. So you can go check that out. Check it out on the baseball tab. So I highly recommend it.
Hutch, you're one of my favorite guys in the business. Thanks for joining me.
No problem.
All right. He's Andrew Hutchinson of Best of Arkansas Sports. I'm Chris Lee of Southeastern 14, presented by Bet Online. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you again soon.